What's going on, everybody? Leo Cannell here with today's Seven Figures Club podcast. Today, my friends, we've got an amazing guest for you. Absolutely. You know that our goal here at this podcast is to help you become one of the 7% of entrepreneurs who actually earn the seven figures, in revenues and beyond, up to 8, 9, 10 figures and so forth. Today, we've got a teacher, a mentor, an entrepreneur who's going to guide you to join the Seven Figures Club and beyond, to take your startup, your dream, and the solution that you're providing for others and get it to the next level. Today, we have Captain Steven Hoffman. He's known as the captain and CEO of Founders Space, which is one of the world's leading startup accelerators. Founders Space was ranked the #1 incubator for overseas startups by Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine. He's also a venture investor, serial entrepreneur, and author of several award-winning books, including Make Elephants Fly. We've got Surviving a Startup, which is his latest book that he's going to enlighten us a little bit more about that, and The 5 Forces. He's been published by Hachette, Ben Bella, and HarperCollins, which is, that's good company there with the entrepreneurs that have been published there. Captain Hoffman, welcome to the podcast.
There are over 32 million businesses in the U.S., and over 90% of them will never break seven figures in annual sales. So how do we as entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs break into that seven figures club? This podcast will relentlessly share the secrets, strategies, and tactics I've used to create 3 multi-seven figures businesses and bring in even more successful entrepreneurs than me to share their inspirational stories and tactics to success. You can create your dream business and life right now. So buckle up and let's go.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Now, when we start this podcast, we always like to kind of understand a little bit more about your background. Of course, everything in that bio kind of, speaks for itself. But Captain Hoffman, going back to when you were a kid in high school, what was your background like? Who was Steven Hoffman? And, where did this entrepreneurship, ideology come from?
I think entrepreneurship for me came from my desire to create and build. So I have always been a builder. When I was a kid, all the way through high school, I made 50 movies with all my friends. Some of them were animated, live action, you name it. I was making it, organizing them. It's also a gamer. So I was not only playing video games, but I was making games, board games, role-playing games, constantly generating stuff, creating stuff. So naturally, when I graduated college, that urge to continue creating and to create my own products drove me to be an entrepreneur. Since then, I've done 2 bootstrap startups and 3 venture-funded startups in Silicon Valley.
Wow. So a number of different startups. And tell us, if you could, about your first startup. What was that like? Where did the idea come from? Did you have partners? How long ago after college did it start? Or did it start in college?
It started after college. I had actually, right after college, I went to school in electrical engineering. I went to grad school in film and television. I worked my way up in Hollywood, became a TV development exec really quickly. I got lucky. Then I jumped over to Japan and worked for their game company, Sega, and helped come up with new ideas for video games. And then I got the itch. After a year of doing that, I was like, I got to get back to the United States, start my own company. So I moved back to Silicon Valley and I launched LavaMind. LavaMind stands for erupting with ideas. And we had so many ideas, but the first product we launched was called Gazillionaire. Now, Gazillionaire, ironically, is a game to teach people to become entrepreneurs and become gazillionaires, or in your terms, seven-figure club. So Gazillionaire, I literally, because I had an engineering background, I coded it myself. And I brought in artists and sound people, but I funded the whole thing. It was a bootstrap startup. And that first game that we made out of my house actually took off in a big way. It was published by the largest PC game publisher at the time, and it just exploded. And Gazillionaire, we went on to make Zapitalism, Profitania, all these games about starting companies, how you start companies, run them, manage people, advertise, everything. And today, those games are on Steam. So they still live all these decades later. The games are still out there and have a fan base.
Captain Hoffman, that's incredible. So your background was in video games and connected up with Hollywood. And, for some of our younger listeners, they might not know Sega, but I certainly recognize Sega and some of those early games. And Sega was kind of like a prelude, I think, to Xbox and to PlayStation. And for a time there, I think really, and I don't know if this is true, it seemed like they overtook Nintendo, which has kind of been number one for a long time before that.
That's correct. I was at Sega when they just passed up Nintendo and became the number one video game company in the world.
Yeah, no, Sega was huge. And so then, all right, you're building stuff for others. You've always been a builder. So how much money did you invest, and this was a little bit a few years ago, how much to actually bootstrap and invest in that online game? And when was this? When was this online game created?
This was in the 90s, the mid 90s.
Okay.
And I invested $10K. And that included everything, hardware, computers, you name it. It was a very low budget game. Yeah. And actually, I like to say the game was outdated the day it was released. It wasn't the cutting edge game that, people think of when they think of video games because we had no money. However, the gameplay was so addictive. People and the artwork was so psychedelic and off the charts that people fell in love with it. And they, fans just stuck with those games.
So the purpose of the game, explain the purpose of the game.
The purpose of the game was you are an interstellar trader and you have to build and run.
Kind of a little Star Wars meets entrepreneurship then.
Yeah, Star Wars. Trek, maybe. Yeah, Star Trek, Star Wars, Alice in Wonderland. It's a crazy game with all these crazy creatures. And you're one of these creatures and you are trading weird things like jelly beans and lava lamps between planets. And there's a very simple but sophisticated economic engine behind there, where you are trying to find out, you have to gauge the different economies of the different planets and quickly decide, what's the best product to buy for certain planets and where to go. And then you're racing your competition to get there. And you have to hire a crew, you have to expand, buy bigger ships, grow your business, but you are always at risk of running into a debt spiral where you literally are spending way more than you can make in the short term, and that can tank your company.
So let's talk about some of the entrepreneurial concepts. Now, obviously, you run a startup incubator, one of the best with Founder Space, but using, this first startup that you had as an example, how did you generate users, customers, clients, whatever you want to call it? And how were you able to discover how much it cost you to generate a paying customer or just, a user on your platform?
When I first started, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. It's the early days. They didn't have startup incubators like I run now. I had no relationship with any venture capital. I just put in my own money, decided I was going to do this. We literally put the game out there. And in those days, it wasn't as easy. They didn't have Steam and all these platforms where you could, Xbox and all these things. So we had to upload our game to BBSs, which were called bulletin boards. People didn't even browse the web then, but the early users were on CompuServe and these AOL and these other platforms, and they could access these bulletin boards and download our shareware. And then they literally, because there was no e-commerce, had to send us cash in the mail, cash or a check. And we received our first sale from none other than Lord Geck. Now, you can imagine who Lord Geck was because he was this total geek on the internet, goatee and all, chubby guy. And, he mailed us in that check and we were so thrilled. We invited him to dinner, to come to our house, have dinner. We got to know Lord Geck and it started that way. And then we were making a little money. But when we really took off was when the quality assurance testers, the game testers, at Microprose Spectrum Hall, the big game company, PC game company at the time, they got hooked on Gazillionaire. They started playing it and they loved it. And the word went up the management chain that we have this game that our whole QA team is playing and they're not doing their testing. We got to get in here and acquire it. So that's what gave us our break and our real start. And they distributed it everywhere, globally, all the retail stores, everything.
And so basically at that point, it gained popularity, it's taking off, it's growing exponentially. And now you have the opportunity for your first exit, it sounds like.
Well, I didn't exit. So this was a company that we just published these games and all the cash came in. And we actually made sure, in this case, we made sure, because this was a labor of love. So we made sure to own all the IP. Like, this was the really smart thing we did early on. We decided we have a great game. We are going to own the sequel rights. So we always kept the rights. And that's why we own them today. And they're just cash cows. Like, they keep paying us like considerable amounts of money many decades later. So for entrepreneurs out there, I like to tell them, and I write about this in my book, Surviving a Startup. Okay. You don't have to get venture funding. That isn't the only path. That is one path. And it's right for certain types of business. So this business was, we were running, basically, we were game developers. And we were running these products, and we could just basically pocket all the cash. And we hadn't really structured it so it was a scalable big business. So in this case, it wasn't really a venture fundable business, and we didn't waste our time trying to raise venture capital. I did that on my second company. I went out and raised venture capital because that was a much bigger play and a whole different business model.
Well, this is a perfect segue, Captain Hoffman. Let's go right into venture capital. Now, when a lot of entrepreneurs are launching, at what point should they be looking to raise capital, or at what point should they be looking to maybe bootstrap a little? And I think there's a misperception of the need to raise capital, maybe, a timing or a sequence, part of that is off for a lot of business owners, especially, 90% of businesses are not big scalable. They might be mom and pop type businesses. So how do you distinguish that? And I'm sure you've got a lot of ideas, but how should someone know it's time to raise capital versus bootstrap?
So there are a lot of signs. First of all, if your business is going to grow linearly, if the revenue and the user engagement isn't going to grow exponentially, forget it. Like, that is not a venture fundable business, because venture capitalists, I'm a venture capitalist now, so I sit on the other side of the table. We understand that if a business isn't growing like crazy, if it's not really shooting up exponentially, the chance of getting an exit, a sizable exit, is really small, because people simply aren't going to acquire that for any amount of money, and it's definitely not going to go public unless you see that growth curve. So
how would you define that, though? How do I know if I'm in a business that has that potential versus one that doesn't?
I will tell you. So there are a few things. One, we talked about scalability. So certain businesses are hard to scale. So let's say you run a consulting business, really hard business to scale, because you have to find talented, trained consultants, retain them and grow. And that takes all time, and it grows slowly. There are big consulting companies, but they tend not to grow fast. And 99% of consulting companies never grow. Another thing is, a lot of businesses, and you'll see these on Kickstarter and Indiegogo all the time, they will sell products. But these gadgets and other things they invent are really cool. Like, they might earn $1 million, $5 million, even $10 million on Kickstarter, but sometimes they aren't scalable. And one of the things is, when you get a customer, when you grab hold of a customer, does a customer buy from you once and then leave? If the customer buys from you once and then leaves, and it's not a big ticket item like a car, like a Tesla, if it's a small item, then it's really hard to make enough money from that customer to go out and acquire more customers. Now, customer acquisition tends to be the biggest challenge for startups. So the businesses that are really good at scaling are when they get a hold of a customer, and they never let go. And they monetize that customer deeply, meaning they monetize that customer not just once, not just twice, but over and over and over again. Look at the companies out there that are totally scalable, the ones that are huge. Amazon, you're always buying something from Amazon. They're always making their share. Google, you're always going back to Google. There's always advertising. It's always making its share. Facebook, the exact same thing. You name the company that grows really, really big, most of them monetize their customers over and over a long period of time. That's called their lifetime value. You get that lifetime value big enough, and then investors can come in and say, whoa, this is a big lifetime value. you know what I'll do? I'll advance you the money to acquire more customers. That's essentially what venture funding is. I'll advance you the money to acquire more customers. I'll advance you the money to build out your team and company to support those sales, because I know I can look and I can tell I'm going to get that money back, in multiples. That's the equation they run in their head. The other thing venture capital like to see in a company is that you lock in those customers, meaning once they come to you, once they buy into your not just product, but your ecosystem, or as we call it in Silicon Valley, your platform, when they buy into that, it's very hard for them to take the value they have there and jump to somebody else because they are locked in. For example, I'll give you a few examples.
Please.
If you have a platform where the customer is actually investing time, investing resources, integrating it with their workflow, all these different things, then to actually take that and move it to somewhere else, really hard. Salesforce is a great example of this. Salesforce isn't the best CRM software out there. Like, there are a lot of competitors and they do a lot of things better. Salesforce is clunky, it's big, it's, not the cheapest out there, not the most streamlined for every task. But what they did was build an incredible ecosystem. So it's not only you get Salesforce when you come there, but they have all these partners who have integrated into their platform, providing services. You literally can't find this entire ecosystem of all these different applications that you can use. And you'll start using the other ones. The more you use it, the more you integrate with all these different partner apps and everything, the harder it is to leave. You just can't take them and jump somewhere else. And nobody else who comes after them can really offer that, because they were a first mover. They captured the market. They got all those third parties in there. That's what building a platform is. So investors like me in Silicon Valley, we're looking for that. Like, Facebook is a different type of lock-in. Like, when you come to Facebook, literally most of your friends are there. They're not. And if you jump to some other new social network, they're probably not going to be there. It's really hard for new social networks to take off and compete with Facebook. And when they do, a lot of times Facebook is smart enough to buy them, like WhatsApp, like Instagram. They'll just jump in and buy them because for huge amounts of money, because they know that they have that network effect. Amazon, two-way marketplace, a whole nother, ecosystem. The more customers there, the more sellers will be there. And the more sellers will be there, the more customers want to come. Boom, you have something extremely valuable, hard to replicate.
Well said, Captain Hoffman. So a lot of these, businesses I'm hearing that you're talking about, they have a platform, they have kind of an online structure. There's recurring revenue, there's subscription models. And one of the books I read recently, Built to Sell, that's one of the things that author promotes is, hey, you want to have something that they're going to come back month after month, just exactly what you're talking about. Now, there was a time it seemed like that you could build a platform, and just if you had users, then eventually the idea was you'd be able to monetize them, kind of maybe like Snapchat and some of these others. But it seems like nowadays you really are seeing a lot of SaaS companies, software as a service. And from day one, there's a value, there's a product, and there's a subscription service with payments. How easy or difficult would it be to create something with free users versus paid users in today's market, would you say?
The freemium model is really powerful. And we see this across SaaS companies, software as a service. They'll offer a free tier. It's usually pretty limited because they want to move you into the paid tier as quickly as possible, but it's enough really to try it out. It's more like a demo. Like, you'll try it out, but if you're a real user, you will upgrade. So that tends to be the preferred model. And investors love SaaS because subscription revenue is predictable. You can literally, you can look at it and say, wow, you have this many customers, they're this engaged, this is a lifetime value. We can run the math. The math is super simple. We can see over their lifetime, you're going to make a lot of money with this. And subscription models allow you to quickly go out. You're not relying on virality or other things. Those help. But every time you get a SaaS customer, they're paying you off the bat. You can turn that money, pump it right back into acquiring more customers. And the companies that tend to become market leaders, they dominate. It's a winner-take-all world. Software is a winner-take-all world because you can scale so fast, and then you can start building out that ecosystem and offering value that almost none of your competitors can compete with if you execute right.
So what I'm hearing from you, Captain Hoffman, is, hey, it's good to have that freemium, that free model where you can generate users, and then as quickly as possible, help them take the next step to a paid version. What do you think some of the keys are, some of the success stories have been of those who have successfully graduated someone from a freemium, account to a paid account? What do you feel like some of those, value bombs are that someone needs to understand, some of our listeners need to pay attention to?
I always say, if you're an entrepreneur out there, you want to know, does my business work? Like, is this thing going to take off? That's what everybody wants to know at the early stage. A lot of people have great ideas. Like, there's so many entrepreneurs come to me with with ideas that sound great. Like, you just pitch them and they sound amazing. But when they put them out into practice in the real world, they just flop. Like, they flop. And it's really hard to tell before you get it out there. That's why in Silicon Valley, we're always pushing entrepreneurs, get your product into the hands of customers as early as possible. And even before you have a product, literally, I don't care what your idea is. I don't care how great it sounds. What I really need to see is not your idea. I need to see that you, as an entrepreneur, have gone into the marketplace and you have identified pent-up demand. Because I say great entrepreneurs aren't people who have this epiphany about a great idea. I actually think the really great entrepreneurs out there are great demand hunters. It's like you're an oil wildcatter and you are out there sticking holes in the ground, looking to release this pent-up explosion of demand, like a gusher. The great thing about the world is demand is always shifting. Like all markets are always changing, new trends are always happening, technologies are being developed all the time. So there's always new demand out there. And a really good entrepreneur will come to an area. First, they'll identify there's a demand here. People are frustrated by this. People want a change here, but they won't have just one idea. They will have lots of ideas and they will start hacking away at it, testing this, testing that, testing. And honestly, if you go up to a customer, you're trying to figure out if your thing is going to take off, right? And you talk to that customer and you talk to 100 customers, let's say, and all 100 customers look at what you have and they say, oh, that's nice. Come back when it's ready. Like, come back when you build it. We'll try it out. If you get that reaction from 100 people, you absolutely know for sure you are dead in the water. Like, your company is, you might as well walk away from that company. You have to pivot like crazy. And you're like, why? 100 people said it was nice. They come back later. Well, they're blowing you off because there are so many nice to have apps and you never use them. I know on my phone, whenever I download an app, I'll look at it. I'll be, oh, that's pretty nice. I forget about it. A month later, it's deleted. That's how people work. The only products that ever go anywhere are where there's that massive demand, what I call extreme demand, where when somebody sees it, they're like, oh my God, I have to have this. Oh, that's so cool. That's so amazing. Or that really solves this problem that's driving me crazy. Or this is on my top 3 list, like my top 3 list. This is something that I've been waiting to get done and you have it for me. I need it today. And if you get that reaction, you got something. That means you hit the demand. And if there are enough other people out there like that, who have that reaction, you got it. Now, graduating them from freemium is not a problem if you have the demand. Like, you literally, all freemium does is show them what you have. It's a great way to get in the door because if they, people who want something, entrepreneurs, I see they're like, lots of them spend years like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill and then rolls down, push it up a hill and rolls down. And they're like, what am I doing wrong? I have this amazing technology. We built this like flawless product. I'm like, but nobody cares. Like, they don't care enough.
There's just this lack of demand. So how do you know if you've got the demand? That just the reaction, just doing the interviews with potential customers and just seeing that reaction? Or how do you actually define that? Hey, I've got magical demand. I've got this. This is something that's real, and I don't have to pivot necessarily.
So if it's B2B enterprise, you're going out to other businesses, you can just tell, like, you get in front of them with this and it hits a pain point and they're like, yes. When you show it to them, if you show it clearly, like, and it doesn't have to be, it could be a prototype, it could even be a PowerPoint or a video, but it shows clearly the solution to their problem that's driving them nuts. They will tell you. They're like, when can you get that to me? Like, I need that yesterday. You will get that reaction. If not, you don't have anything. It's sort of binary. Either you have it or you don't. And when you have it, you know for sure you'll have it. Like if you're looking at them, they're lining up to get whatever you have. If you have a beta, they're flooding into that beta. They're like, they need it. If you aren't getting that, if it's consumer, it's another story. Like consumers,
right. There's a lot more complication, but if it's B2B, you'll generally see that reaction a lot quicker, and it's pretty clear.
It's a consumer, you have to build a minimum viable product. You have to get a basic product out there usually to test the market. And that's why iterating really fast and learning how to get these products, these consumer products especially, into people's hands. And I always like to say, people buy a product for one reason. They don't buy it for 10 reasons. It's not like it does this well, it does this well, it does this well. You know, that comes later. When you are first launching your startup, you have to hit that one extreme reason that they absolutely did, which means, you know, because your product does one of two things. One, it's either exponentially better than anything else out there that solves that problem, right? It's not incrementally better. If it's incrementally better, people, they don't have time. Like, oh, that's great. You added some extra features. It makes it a little better. We don't care. It has to be like so much better that they're like, I can't live without this. I have to have it. Or it has to solve a different problem that isn't being solved. So it taps into you're creating new core value for these customers that they don't have using new technology or some new way of doing things, a new business model. You're creating that. And they're like, oh, I need this in addition to all the other products I have.
So go in there with the idea that your product's going to solve one really big problem. It's okay if you have additional options, benefits that solve additional problems, but really it's about that one core problem at the beginning. When you're first launching and starting out. Now, in your book, Surviving a Startup, Captain Hoffman, you talk a lot about, listen, 90% of startups do fail, and absolutely everybody needs to buy this book so that they can understand what they need to do to avoid that. But just, thinking about that book, what's one of the big reasons why startup fails? And for every listener out there who's trying to get a side hustle or get something off the ground, what is something they need to be aware of right from day one?
One of the biggest reasons startups fail is because people stick with the same idea too long. Because once you invest in an idea, you become passionate about it. You want it to succeed. It's your baby. And it's really hard. A lot of entrepreneurs, and I did this myself in the early days. For one of my first company was great, but later on I ended up falling into this trap, is that you start to filter feedback because you really want to believe that everything you put into this company is working. That's why, if entrepreneurs, so they stick with it too long and they literally run off a cliff. They run out of money and time and energy and they die. The really great entrepreneurs out there, surprisingly, try a lot of things and quit all the time really fast. So they'll try something. It's working. Oh, it's not working. Try something else. It's working. No, not working. Try something else. And they just keep hammering away until they figure out that magic thing. I mean, you look out there and there's some great examples like Words with Friends, right? I think that was like their 50th game that they were making, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy.
That was a good one.
Yeah. And then they could exit, and other companies, if you look at Slack, which is enormously popular today.
Oh, we sure love it. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were making a game originally that failed. They were making a game and the game wasn't working. And then they were scrambling around. And instead of sticking with it and keep adding features and praying that this game goes, they looked around, they said, oh, our engineers have developed a really good communication system between themselves. What if we commercialize this? People even look at YouTube, seems like an overnight success, YouTube. Well, it wasn't. It was a video dating site when it began, a video dating site. And they were failing. And only as they were failing, they actually figured out, we want to share video files and we could use our platform to actually upload them there and just share a link, which allowing people to see the video files online. Boom. That, as soon as they made that pivot, their business exploded. So for all the companies out there, don't stick with it. If it's not working quickly, you can't, putting lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, right? If the core thing doesn't work, it doesn't work.
You know what? That is so huge. So it's kind of this need to understand when is the time to pivot. And it reminds me of an example that I learned actually in a business law class when I was back in school way back when. And he talked about there was this very tight bridge and these two cars were coming. They were both in their lane and they ran into each other, and one of them fell off the bridge and people died. And who's liable, right? And so, oh, the city, the car's liable, the driver's liable. No, it's the other driver. And what is the case telling you? What is the case telling you is reality? They went and measured it, and the road was too small. It wouldn't have mattered how big the car was. They were going to run into each other because the case was telling them actually the city screwed up on the road. And so it's, what is the market telling you, right? You had this idea, oh, it's YouTube dating, it's video dating. No, it's YouTube. People just love videos. They want to put videos up. They want to share the video of their dog, their cat, their family. And I think that's so big. What is the market telling you? What is your client telling you? And being open-minded enough to say, it's not what I think is right, it's what the market thinks is right. And that's something I've really learned painfully over the years. And it sounds like you learned it really quickly.
I learned it too, because I fell in love with my product. I fell in love, and I have a rule. Don't fall in love with your product. It doesn't matter how much you love it, how much you're passionate about it, how hard. If you could work every day, all day, day and night for the rest of your life on something, and it's not going to make a difference unless the customer loves it. So love your customer and build what your customer loves. And if you do that, that's the perfect recipe for success.
Amen. Well said. Well, in the book here, it also takes you through the bolts and sweat and tears of running a real business. It's kind of about dealing with, dysfunctional teams. And at the end of the day, what I really want to ask you is, when you're early on and you're building your startup, how do you build that culture? And Reid Hoffman talks about a culture of candor, a culture where, you're attracting the top talent. And what are some of those foundational things that you have to do from day one if you're going to have a real culture in your team that attracts talent and gives you the chance to create a team that can scale?
Entrepreneurs ask me this question a lot. They're like, how do I build a great company? How do I attract great people, especially at the beginning when I don't have a lot of money? Like, how do I attract the best people in the world? And I'll tell you, if you don't attract top tier people, A+ people, somebody else will, and they'll beat you. Like inferior teams, even with a great idea and they're on the right path, they will fumble the ball and somebody else will pick it up and run with it, a better team. So having that team in place from day one is so important. I actually tell entrepreneurs at the beginning, before you start spinning off ideas, before you start going to customers, before you do anything else, please put 80% of your time into getting the right co-founders. Like, that is more important than anything else, because you don't know, like, probably where you're starting out, the idea you're starting with, it's going to not be totally right or even completely wrong. But if you have these great people surrounding you, you have a chance to break through. Those are the companies that break through. But how do you get them? To your question, how do you get these people? I will tell you, it's not having a lot of money. That doesn't attract them. It's not having ping pong tables and free lunches and all these things and going to offsites. Don't worry about that. Like, it doesn't matter at the beginning. What really matters more than anything else is that when you approach people, you don't approach them. And this is another reason I say it's best to start off with no idea at all. Like, no idea. Like, people like, I have to have the epiphany before I do a startup. I'm like, you do not have to have an epiphany because you don't know anything usually. The best thing you can do is have a direction, an area you're really interested in improving and innovating on. So you have this direction. You go out and find like-minded people, but not average people, people who are pretty amazing in their field, who have other backgrounds than you. Like, some are technical, some are marketing, some really understand, that whole ecosystem that you're about to play in. You bring them together. And because all of them have ideas, all of them are really passionate about making a change in this area, you allow all of you to own it. Like, at the beginning, instead of you just owning it and having them buy into you in your, whatever you want to do, you say, it's us. We're going to change this industry. Like, we're going to change the restaurant business. We're going to turn it on its head. There are a lot of inefficiencies in the restaurant business. Restaurants are suffering. They can't find talent. We're going to make a radical change there. Or we're going to go to the fishing industry, like with all the bycatch, and they're depleting our fish stocks. And we're going to remake that fishing industry. You get all those right people who are just the perfect people for you to work with, both on a personal level, emotional level, and also technically, like execution-wise. and you focus on bringing them in. When you get them in, that's when you go out and start, if it's the restaurant industry, you start burrowing into the restaurant industry, getting to know everything you can about that industry. Where do they have their headaches? What frustrates them? What are the things, what are their top 5 priorities? Like, if you're not on that list, forget it. Like, what are the things that they're like really looking to do right now? Can you come in there with your team and understanding technology in a way that people in the industry don't, understanding being innovative and creative and new business models? Can you radically change this industry? That's what you do. And that's then the rest. Company culture takes care of itself. Like, I've seen the best company cultures when they're working in this rundown office building in a strip mall, like with wires sprouting out of the walls, but the people there are totally motivated. Like, they don't care because they believe in what they're doing, and they believe they're a part of it. They feel value for what they're creating. They love the people they're working with. That is great company culture. But so don't worry about any of the other frills. Worry about getting people who already want to do this, who are passionate about, and giving them a chance to do that together.
So it sounds like really just having a big mission, some big purpose that solves a big problem that people can be passionate about. That's more important than money. That's more important than the ping pong tables and the food and all the other, free stuff that you can get. It sounds like that's what really matters.
And big mission, really important. Also really important how you approach them. So a great way to get people totally bought into what you're doing is not to be telling them what to do, like acting like their boss. I'm the CEO, you do this, you do that, you do this. Because when you're telling them, you're shutting them down. Like, they just have to listen to you and do what you say. But if you really want a great company culture, I have a rule, and it's called ask, don't tell. So try this in your company. Like, for a whole week, I challenge you, Leo, go into your company.
I'm in. I'll do it.
And okay, and then you can report back to your listeners a week from now what happens. Go into your business. Try not to tell a single person a single thing for a week, what to do. It's hard. It's hard. All of us are used to telling people. Instead, you go in every day and you ask them, what do you think? What are you working on? You get information. What do you think the next steps are? Do you think you can move up the deadline? And you just ask them questions. And all the time you're gaining more information because you're not telling them. Do you think there's a better way to do that? You can ask your employees. You want them to improve? Instead of saying, just improve, improve, that doesn't help them. And that sounds like ridiculous. Like, improve, do it better. You can't, but you go to them and you say, do you think there's a smarter way to do this? Are there some platforms out there or technologies that you think we could use? Come back to me with that. If you are constantly asking your employees, suddenly they're going to transform. They're going to be like, oh, my boss just asked me. And then they're going to feel like responsible and ownership, oh, the boss trusts me to figure this out, to do this a different way, to do it better, to get it faster, whatever you want, put it in question format.
And I think that's one of the most powerful things when it comes to sales, when it comes to training, when it comes to whatever it is, connecting with your customer, a strategic partner, it's asking the right questions. It's not talking about yourself. It's not talking about your product. It's asking them the questions. What are the problems that they are running against? And what do they see as the solutions? And then trying to guide and help them. So that's huge. I will absolutely, commit to ask them those questions and moving forward that way.
And you could tell me, and it's great, even if there are problems in there. Your job as CEO, you're too busy to solve every problem in your company. So if 2 employees, they aren't communicating, or 2 groups, you can go to each group and say, how do you think you guys can solve this problem? Can you come back to me with a plan for how you can get communication, how we can eliminate that bottleneck? Whatever it is, you're just constantly asking. And then you'll find your team is so much more productive and happy.
So let's say you've got this idea, you're getting traction, and you're trying to get the whole team behind it. You're solving, a problem that it's mission driven. How important is it, and how do you structure a way so that someday you have an exit, a merger, an acquisition, you maybe an IPO, whatever it is, you get to that big mountaintop. How do you position it so that everybody can get a piece of the pie, and from day one they have ownership in this entire idea as well?
I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there are too worried about their own equity share being diluted. So I work with him all the time. I've had an entrepreneur come up to me just the other day, and he owns like 83% of the company. And he was like worried that he was going to get diluted, like for, not giving, during all these funding rounds. I'm like, you have 83% of the company. Don't worry about it. Like, you focus, this isn't your biggest problem, because you're either going to be very rich or very, very rich or extremely rich, or you'll have nothing. Like, it's like, either it's no matter what if it's a good outcome, you'll be fine. Like, so what you really do is don't hoard equity. Like, be generous with your team. And Jack Ma at Alibaba is a great example of this. Alibaba, like, he gave away more equity than almost anybody ever gives. Like, he had a really small percentage of Alibaba by the time he was done. He's a real team person, like, and he was just like, he got this amazing team together, and he was just giving them lots of equity. He's still one of the richest people in the world at the end of the day, because, Alibaba became so huge, and then they spun off Ant Financial, which he had an enormous stake in. So like, huge. One success leads to another. Don't obsess with just protecting your equity. Make it so that your team has a decent equity. Of course, you're going to put in stock options with a 4-year vesting plan. So if somebody leaves early, they're not going to walk away with a bundle of equity. And you need to do that with the founders. You need to do that from the beginning. Like, any company that is just giving out equity without vesting, including your own shares, like, if the people aren't committed to sticking with the company, they shouldn't get it. But if they stick with it in the long run, they work out well and they work really hard, they should be well rewarded.
I like that. I think that's so important that everybody has a stake, even if it's a small piece, a small percentage. Hey, that thing goes IPO or merger acquisition, whatever it is, everybody's going to win. Now, everyone's on the same page, and they actually have ownership. And I think if you're listening, that is so powerful. That is so amazing. All right. So how everyone's listening to this, how can they work with, you, with your team, with your company? How can they be part of your incubator so that they can take their startup from where it's at to where they want to be, which is the next step? What's the next step? How do they take action?
So a great way, if you want to work with Founderspace, is just come to founderspace.com. We have tons of content up there, startup kits, free videos, all this really deep material that can get you to the next level. So come to Founderspace. You can actually submit your business plans on our site. You can also reach out to me. Like, I'm on Founderspace. There's a contact button on the front page. If you put my name in there, it'll get to me. You can also go to LinkedIn. Like, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social networks. Just search for Founderspace or Captain Hoff. I'm there. I love working with startups. And our goal is really to help help any companies out there with these hard problems. And we have different programs for different companies. We have like very simple educational programs for first-time entrepreneurs who are just beginning, and very sophisticated accelerator programs for mature companies that are really ramping up.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable, guys. I'm at founderspace.com right now. Like he said, you can apply to Founderspace Accelerator. He's got programs on venture capital, on corporate innovation. He has seminars. He's got workshops. He's obviously got the books. You want to definitely start with getting Surviving a Startup. So, because at the end of the day, too, starting a business is not for everybody. I used to have this ideology or like everybody should and can start a business. But I know at the end of the day, some people, the risks, all the different things. But for those crazy people and you're listening to this podcast and you need to start a business and you've got an idea that's going to solve a really big problem, Surviving a Startup is a book you want to start out with. And then, of course, founderspace.com and learning from someone who's done it. I was speaking at an event with David Meltzer, who was CEO of, some pretty big sports agencies back in the day, still is. The movie Jerry Maguire was about a company that he was the CEO of. But he talks a lot about, listen, life is not that complicated. It's an entrepreneur. Go talk to someone like Captain Steven Hoffman, who started businesses, who's built them, who's made that impact, who's had exits, who understands, and ask him for directions. He's already gotten to where you want to be. Life is not that complicated. Don't overcomplicate it. Go ask for directions from someone who's already lived it, done what you want to do, and it makes it so much easier to get things done, guys. Well, I want to give you the last word, Captain Hoffman. We're awfully grateful that you spent some time with us. We're even more grateful that your resources and tools are there. What's the final word and the final focus that someone should think about in terms of looking at the fear of not starting that business?
Okay, the fear of not starting the business. Don't be afraid. So first of all, if you fail, and a lot of us do, there's always as long as you're breathing, there's another chance. You can go out there and do it again. So just take the leap. And honestly, all my businesses and most of the entrepreneurs I work with, they just do it. They just dive in there and they don't necessarily know a lot about the industry they're going into. And that's a disadvantage, but it's also an extreme advantage because you're seeing that industry through fresh eyes. And you can do things, you can imagine things that people in the industry are just blind to. So I really encourage you to do that. I also want to give your listeners free access to our 10 commandments of raising venture capital. So if they go there to Founderspace/10, they can actually access this for free.
Oh, thank you so much. They're going to really benefit from that. Obviously, funding is a big part of what we do in terms of debt funding for smaller companies. But at some point, you're going to need some venture capital to take the next step. And that's where the expertise of Founderspace comes in handy so much. Thank you again, Captain Hoffman, for being here with us. And everyone, take action. If you listen to this podcast, don't just say, wow, that was good information. Go take action. Go to founderspace.com. Get the book, Surviving a Startup. Take action and do it right now. If you're driving, pull over, use your phone, take action. That's the most important thing, because if you just listen and, oh, this is great information, you don't do anything, then you're not going to benefit. So take the action and benefit. And we'll see you next time on the flip side of the 7 Figures Club podcast.
Are you looking for more 7-figure secrets, content, or even how you can launch your own recession-proof business? Then check out 7figures.com. That's the digit 7, Figures.com, where we share more videos, stories, strategies, funding solutions, entrepreneurial education, and even the secret business type that's recession-proof. Thank you for listening, and if you're finding value in our podcast, please give us a 5-star and invite others to join the club.